Good evening, everyone. My name is Tanysia Komers. I am a certified financial planner and the founder and president of KFLA, Canada's first financial literacy agency. So today I am joined by Jill Chambers of the Financial Concierge. She has a background of 30 years in nursing or healthcare as a nurse, and then 10 years in financial services. She has a number of different designations. I'm going to start with the top. She is also a CFP like me. You are also a CIM, so a chartered investment manager, a CEA, a certified executive estate? Please tell me.
Certified executor advisor.
Okay, what does that mean?
We can advise and we can also act as executors. So we can be a professional executor. It gives people an option. Another one that is a chartered financial divorce specialist. So
right.
Obviously I'm a lifelong learner.
No kidding. Yeah. So what I have Jill here to talk about today is actually financial mistreatment or financial abuse. And the reason she's here to do that is she helps people deal with kind of all the nitty gritty money stuff, especially people who need a little bit more support, right? The reason that I am stretching, of course, is because, Jill, you told me that the way that you have been relaxing during COVID and staying calm is with your morning stretches. So today, I am trying to stretch while we chat.
Oh, good for you.
First thing, you obviously, having so much work with seniors, immediately mentioned senior financial abuse, and that's something that people always think of right off the hop. But I want to talk today a little bit about why financial mistreatment, as you put it, actually occurs to a lot of people, and it impacts a lot of people across generations. And I want to talk about how to identify it, why we don't hear about it, what we can do about it, and basically who's most affected. So Jill, please enlighten me. Why do we call it financial mistreatment rather than financial abuse? And can you give me some examples? Because it seems really extreme.
I think abuse is a very highly charged, emotionally charged word.
That's fair.
Most of the seniors I deal with have been, I would say, financially abused at the hands of family members.
Yeah.
They would not call it abuse. They would say, well, my daughter didn't treat me very well, or my son, was really being a jerk when he was doing that.
Mm-hmm. To call it financial abuse does seem a little really victimizing, poor me. What is it that's happening to these clients of yours? What are you seeing?
It is just, there's an amazing array, and every client I run into, there's a different situation.
Yeah.
Probably the first client I worked with was a senior lady, and she had relocated from BC.
Mm-hmm.
She had broken her ankle quite severely, was in hospital for many weeks, numerous surgeries, rehab. Mm-hmm. And during that time, her daughter, son-in-law, and their children moved into her house and literally took over her home.
Okay.
Somehow they had access to her banking and her credit cards, so racked up the credit cards, emptied out the bank accounts. When she was well enough to be discharged home, she literally had to have them evicted.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
And this was the first time that it sort of really brought to my mind, you would tend to have the vision of somebody who's being abused as being, maybe they're vulnerable in other ways. Maybe they are cognitively challenged. Maybe they don't have good knowledge about money.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's other things that just sort of led to that situation. This woman was a lab tech, highly educated.
Smart woman, on top of her stuff, but just not paying attention. That story when I was a student, realizing that the bank was charging me, $40 a month rather than my student charges, and going to them and saying, hey, what's this about? And the first thing they said was, well, you should have noticed, right? Obviously, if you care so much, you should have been paying attention. And that's the attitude that I would say is kind of prevailing when anything happens to anyone with their money is, well, it's your fault. You should have been paying attention. How did you not catch that before?
Is that it's really helpful to have a second set of eyes to kind of check those bank statements, make sure that they are getting the senior's discount, that they're not being charged some crazy fee. There was one gal that I was working with. She had a line of credit she'd been paying off over, 36 months or so. And somebody insisted that she have insurance on this line of credit.
What?
And the insurance was some ridiculous amount per month. Now, to me, that is somebody's taking advantage of this woman because she's elderly and isn't terribly savvy and maybe not using computer. So
like, this is kind of the financial mistreatment. The reason I wanted to highlight this is this happens all the time. I've got a good buddy who, he's in his 30s now, but one of his first relationships, like, or at least a couple of them, he had a pattern of picking up chicks who would basically spend all his money for him. You know, and like, and when you think about it, that's technically financial mistreatment, right? You know, to get into somebody else's bank accounts, to spend their money for them, to stick them with bills they didn't plan for. It's not healthy.
mm-hmm. And people are embarrassed, which
Yeah,
is why they typically don't tell anyone. And even
absolutely.
when it's very blatant that these adult children have been pilfering tens and thousands of dollars from a
Yeah,
parent,
yeah.
they're mortified to think that, like, what kind of parent am I that my children
Hmm.
would turn out this way? So people are embarrassed. They don't want to air their dirty laundry in public, so they're not going to contact the police.
Of course. Well, you were saying that, I think you said that you sit on exercise balls around the office?
I do. Typically, right now I'm not in my home office, but I do
Hmm.
have an exercise ball I usually sit on instead of a chair,
Yeah.
and then the foam roller in the morning, and
Oh,
yeah,
you get the, I might have a minute to foam roll here as well.
sat down with a client and her two adult children. This gal is not a senior, but had numerous health problems,
Right.
and sons have been there to help in the past, and now they were just helping themselves,
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
ordering from Skip the Dishes every day, every second day, helping themselves to $150, $260 on just about a daily basis
Just
from her bank.
basically living on mom's dollar.
We had changed her email addresses, we changed her passwords, we thought
Hmm.
we had protected her accounts.
Hmm.
And one of the sons had made a comment, oh, it doesn't matter. I can get in using my thumbprint. When she went into hospital one of these last times, her sister said, I have a feeling the boys are getting into her bank account again. And sure enough, between the two of them, I think there was about, let's see, 13, about $21,000 that they had helped themselves to over
You know,
time.
that is so nuts. And the thing is, you know, I can almost hear the rationalization, like, well, 21,000, if mom's got, let's say, even a couple $100,000, she's not going to be around that long. Does she really need it? She's not going to notice. You know, it's, I'm her kid. It's probably, actually, this leads me to one of the points you made when we were talking last time, is how this issue isn't black and white. And that's why it's so hard to follow through on. So please explain that a little bit more.
Well, in families, as you say, there's patterns of behavior. So when we sat down and had a family meeting, you know, these boys, the best defense is a good offense. Well, we've always been able to reimburse ourselves when we pick stuff up for you, or we bought stuff, or you
Of
asked us
course.
to do things on your behalf.
We kind of talked about, like, why don't we hear this? Well, like, why don't we know more about this? Like, why haven't we heard of financial mistreatment? Why is this something that's so hard to identify? Um, and I think that the things that we talked about a little bit were kind of the shame, the fact that people, you know, don't want to be victimized, that it's also really hard to recognize. And many people believe that they are at fault for not knowing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think so too. So I say they're embarrassed that this happened.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's a little bit like your experience at the bank.
Hmm.
The reaction could be, well, if you're that concerned about your money, why weren't you watching your statements?
Exactly. And
It's
then,
now later when you're finally saying anything.
yeah. And because you didn't care that whole time through, now all of a sudden you're like, wait, did I care? Am I a horrible person? Maybe I do deserve to pay $40 a month for a student bank account with 12 transactions.
Even if people sense that there's something wrong, or they know something is not right, they don't know where to go.
Mm,
And there aren't a lot of resources. If you go to the government helplines like 811 or
yeah.
311, which is supposed to be the be all and end all, they are happy to refer you to somebody that will teach you how to set a budget.
Yeah.
Not what these people need.
Yeah.
They're happy to refer you to sort of debt solutions. Like maybe you need a
Hmm.
consumer proposal. But again, that's not the problem. These people need someone in there to provide a second set of eyes, and take over doing some of that money management and put a stop to it.
Do you yoga as well, or is it just like strictly kind of stretching?
Well, I was doing yoga on a regular basis prior to COVID happening, and I
Right.
just can't get that excited about watching videos or doing a webinar. I
Me
really like
neither.
the people contact. I'm
Yeah,
a person, so
I hear
uh,
you.
I'm looking forward to getting back to it sometime in the near future.
Other thing that I was going to mention that I think is also really important is this type of, let's call it crime, is really, really hard to uh, to make claims on, to file complaints with the police, first of all, because of the victimization, the embarrassment, et cetera, but also because the police, quite frankly, rarely know what to do with it, if they can do anything about it at all. So there's, I mean, some additional layers of difficulty there when it comes to taking action.
A lot of times if it's abuse and there's blood and bruises, then you get a reaction.
Yeah. And even if it's to the tune of, as you're saying, a couple $100s a month that the kids are taking, like that's still a couple $100s a month, that somebody is stealing.
It's, it isn't the amount as much as the thought that you're taking it without permission. It's one thing for a parent to say, I'm going to subsidize your cost of living, or I'm going to help you out because you were in the oil patch, you're out of work, you burned through all your severance, your RSPs, your tax-free savings, and now you're pretty desperate.
What do you think we can actually do about it? Because we've spent the last couple of minutes talking about how it's kind of difficult to spot. It's difficult to take any legal action on, if there's any legal action on, maybe 10% of people making reports.
Yeah, it's very much underreported.
Yeah.
And really, as many as 8 out of 10 seniors will have experienced some kind of abuse.
8 out of 10.
8 out of 10. And they're defining a senior somebody 65 and over, but most of it is family members.
Right.
So then again, you've got somebody who's in a position of trust.
Yeah.
So what can they do?
What can they do about it?
They need to, first of all, they need to talk to somebody. Maybe they talk to their banker. Maybe they talk to somebody in their social network, a family friend, but it doesn't have to continue. I think the other thing be for people to be really knowledgeable about what's involved when you do establish a power of attorney, because that's a very, very big role.
You hand over everything.
You have to be so careful.
We talked about this originally. Part of the reason that I really wanted you here, Jill, was because I was shocked to have never, ever considered this to be something that affects my clients as a professional. It's like one of the stories that I shared with you earlier that was a bit of a, heart wrencher for me that always stayed with me, was a couple where, he was quite confident, ready to retire, no problem. He had his stuff squared away. And she, them being a married couple, coming in to talk to me simultaneously about their joint finances, was struggling, in debt, barely able to float the household, responsible for the majority of the household expenses, while he was basically, as I said, retired, golfing, etc. And the disparity there was something that was quite striking and definitely made me uncomfortable, but I had none of the tools to identify what it was that I was seeing, which now I can tell you was definitely financial mistreatment, and control, certainly, but that's not something that I knew of before. So I was wondering if you had any advice, and if we could think of anything that we could tell anyone else who is on the front lines, what sort of signs they might be able to identify, and how they can help. What do you think?
I think a big one would be when you're talking with clients about their budget, like what's coming in each month and what's going out each month.
Yeah.
And to track and share with you that kind of information, because we know there's always a disparity.
Yes.
But what comes in versus what's spent, typically there's a big difference, and there's an amount that is unaccounted for. So to me, that would be a red flag.
So let's say you're bringing in, just because I want to make sure that I'm really clear, you see somebody who makes $4,000 a month, and they're like, well, my expenses should be about $2,500, but they're somehow always empty in the bank account. Exactly. And they can't figure out why and where the money is bleeding.
The other thing would be, if you are looking at bank statements, if there's an awful lot of cash withdrawals, and where's the cash going? And I'm one of those people, I need the routine. I need to know that it's at 9:30 on Saturday and Sunday mornings, and that, block it in my calendar, and then I do it. If it's just left up to me, I'll do laundry or find something else to do instead.
Yeah, well, especially when you're stuck at home, it's really easy to work or do anything really, rather than work out. Okay, so there's a lot of business partnerships that I know of over my career that have blown up from fraud, financial mistreatment, etc., where one partner is taking advantage of the other financially pretty aggressively. And so I would say an inequality in duties and an inequality in responsibility, either financially or just in terms of work to a project, is a really big red flag as well. One of the things to watch for would be like gross inequalities, such as that between family members.
And I also find that sometimes parents are very, very generous and they're very quick at sort of handing out cash to children.
Right.
Then if you find out that there's actually 4 children and one of them has been the recipient of the majority of this cash, then that's going to cause issues and friction.
That is a really, really good thing to highlight for estate planning, actually. It's a good point. Yep. At the end of the day, too, when you are effectively going through probate, when the family is settling the estate, there's less squabbling. There's more of a, as you're saying, a paper trail to be able to say, look, maybe Johnny, who lived in the apartment for free, is squabbling about the fact that Joe got all of this free cash, but maybe he's not mentioning that he lived in the apartment for free. So it isn't black or white when you're kind of working with somebody's money, because, did mom buy you a coffee? Probably, but then did she buy you that new TV? Probably not, but at the same time, that's a really easy line to argue, as you're saying, when it comes down to that sort of financial mistreatment. And I mean, again, the same thing can be said about your business partner. Did you okay your business partner to take out that $10,000 loan in your name or not, or $100,000 loan or $1 million loan for that matter? And then for your spouse, did you okay your spouse to sign you into a contract or a lease for 5 years that your name wasn't on? Like that happens.
It's really interesting. Because there was a client recently where she and her husband were separated,
Mm-hmm.
and they were jointly on the mortgage of the home, and the divorce wasn't finalized yet. And he phoned up to do something about renewing the mortgage, and because it was held jointly, they said no. And have you talked to your wife? Is she in agreement? Yeah. Oh yeah, she's fine with that. And they, somewhere in their paperwork, even though it's joint, they didn't need to have both signatures.
What? I thought they had.
I did too.
I thought they had to have both signatures. With some of my wealthier clients and couples, if there's one client who has the relationship with the institution, they will usually be able to kind of do stuff on behalf of their spouse, even though they probably shouldn't.
I think money is sort of the last frontier in terms of families talking openly. I mean, it used to be you didn't.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Politics. I think people are much freer talking about those issues, but money is still private.
It's a very taboo subject, absolutely. And to talk about your current situation or what you're going through or whatnot. And that's what makes people so easy to take advantage of, though, right? Is because you don't know what's acceptable. You don't know what's good behavior, what isn't. Imagine if you were never taught table manners.
I'm reading something recently where, they're saying, well, what do you think, what would be a typical victim of sort of a fraud scam or an investment scam? And you tend to think of people, maybe people that don't have a lot of experience investing. The typical individual that gets caught up in an investment fraud scam is a 56-year-old male.
Ha! Yeah, because they're very confident. I could see that. And of course, like at that point, you have more money to invest and you're looking for different options. The other thing that actually doesn't surprise me about that age range is that's usually the age where people are really starting to look, I would like to get the most growth out of my retirement portfolio. So I'm going to look for interesting options in order to really accelerate it. And those interesting options are not always the right ones or appropriately built into a portfolio or strategized for.
Or they may have made some very poor decisions. We've had a couple of really huge market downturns.
Yeah.
And if they've lost a big chunk of their portfolio, they are now looking to recoup their losses.
Yeah.
And how much is the old boys club? Oh, think a hot tip on the golf course. And
absolutely. Do your due diligence and make sure you're being strategic around it. But I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, because at the end of the day, like you could say that about basically any partnership, whether it's a spouse or a business or an investment. Do your due diligence and make sure you're strategic about it.
Easier said than once you're into the relationship.
Jill, I really appreciate your time here. I think that our conversation was really interesting, and I'm hoping that we put something together that was like informative, that'll help people identify what they're like to be a
And if
little
they
bit,
have, if they
yeah.
have, they can always get a hold of you and you can connect us. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jill. I appreciated stretching with you this evening.
Okay, alrighty. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Without flashing.
I know, right? I try to get a little bit of it in there without seeing too much.